Hi, my name is Eric Little, and this is my Unit 3 recap for Professor Taylor. The executive branch. The U.S. operates in a bureaucracy-oriented way. The monopolistic, acquisitive, and Weberian model all have aspects that contribute to how U.S. society is ran. The U.S. runs the government in different modes of bureaucracy. For example, the Weberian model that was proposed by German sociologist Max Weber stands on the principality of that power flowing from the top down. Likewise, the decision-making process in bureaucracies are shaped by detailed technical rules that are to be applied when similar situations come about, thus leading to similar decision outcomes. The acquisitive model argues that the bureaucrats will always try to expand or at least avoid reductions in budget sizes. Although bureaucracies are non-profit enterprises, they often try to maximize the budget and staff size. Budget size and staff size are the most noticeable enablers of power in the public sector. These particular efforts are made to sell product to both Congress and the public, whether it be national defense, public housing, or agricultural subsidies. Because government bureaucracies seldom have qualified competition, some theories suggest that these organizations are monopolistically modeled, which in a sense the government moves in accordance to monopolistic firms and businesses. The benefit of the monopolistic model is that essentially no competitors lead to the government acting according to their own private interests. The monopolistic bureaucracies are not penalized for chronic inefficiency. They have little reason to adopt cost-saving measures or adopt new plans to make more productive use of their resources. Which brings me to the subject of student loans, which wasn't increasingly popular among Americans until the turn of the 19th century. Around 1910, a monopolistic, business-savvy American by the name of John D. Rockefeller proposed to the higher-ups a full tuition-based higher education advocated for students to shoulder the cost of their own education. His ideology came from the Caucasians attending private universities for the social atmosphere instead of the educational value. Rockefeller and associates didn't want to shoulder the cost to educate Americans anymore, although all Americans weren't attending college for social values. His ideology would become the seeds for the $1.7 trillion debt student loans has accumulated the American government. The outcomes of agency capture unveil the corruptness of American government, being that regulatory agencies, which are supposedly independent, may in fact not always be so. Over the last several decades, the industries, firms, businesses, etc., that were supposed to be regulated have bought out these agencies, leading to those agencies making decisions based in favor of business interests instead of the general public. The results of agency capture have, 1, been less competition rather than more, which in turn builds up monopolies. 2, higher prices instead of lower. For example, the rising cost of tuition, something that was once looked upon as a tool for society growth, now being used as a profit-producing gift that just keeps on giving. And lastly, fewer choices rather than more for the consumers. With tuition fees skyrocketing, it's leaving many lower class and middle class Americans to resort to getting a job at the high school instead of furthering education. The intimidating presence of student loans and forever growing interest rates don't advertise a good college experience. Being consumed in debt is not a part of anyone's American dream, but it is still a possible reality. Okay. Interest groups play a big role in politics. Having the ability to influence policymaker decisions is powerful enough. Interest groups in favor of student loans have been active in lobbying elections ever since the 1996 election, in which the companies have consistently dedicated their funds and interests to the Republican Party. The social movement led by John D. Rockefeller and other like-minded businessmen led to social movements happenings all across the country in the latter half of the 19th century, Seeing that more college presidents and administrators were becoming favorable of making students pay the full cost it takes to educate them, the latent interest of minority groups who already struggle with bills of everyday life began to see college as a scam, making upper class members shoulder the burden of their education didn't have the same effects as it did on the lower classes. The financial cushioning isn't as common in the lower classes. Material incentives keep policymakers at bay about loan forgiveness and making college less lucrative for the government. Although educational entities have taken a downward spiral with their lobbying activity over the course of the last few years, the previous efforts are still fresh with policymakers. Interest groups in America are constantly fighting for the stronghold on American policymakers through building alliances. Most business-minded entities flow towards the Republican Party, while labor-friendly interests reside mostly with Democrats. Political parties began formulating around 1789 to 1816. Ever since then, there's been a constant struggle over power. Main determining factors of political differences is the views held on certain subjects. Democrats in the 2020 election are pushing forward the agenda of free college. As Bernie Sanders started out doing in 2016, Republicans, on the other hand, give free college an unequivocal no, as Donald Trump says. Demographic factors play major roles in where a citizen will allow their loyalty to lie, where the general idea that most Republicans are upper middle class and upper class, while Democrats are the lower classes. Throughout the political history of campaigns and elections, there has been a growing connection between money and political candidates. Indeed, this is a sensitive issue, and there is a widespread belief that the major contributions to funding an election sway the decision making, which can lead to corruption. The Hatch Act of 1939 placed restrictions on civil servants' political activities. The act made it unlawful for political groups to spend more than $3 million in any given campaign, while also setting the individual contribution cap at $5,000. The Hatch Act took steps in the right direction, but restrictions as such are easily circumvented by making additional political parties. The Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 made further efforts at limiting political corruption by placing a restriction on the amount that could be spent on campaign advertising, limiting the amount that candidates could contribute to their own campaign, and required disclosure of all contributions over $100. The Federal Election Campaign Act of 1971 made efforts at limiting the role of labor unions and corporations in political campaigns. Acts set in place to keep corruption at minimum are well appreciated, but further efforts need to be made. The elites have a generous amount of disposable income, which in turn is used to push their interests forward upon policymakers. I would like to ask my viewers to recognize that loan forgiveness and free college have the potential to advance society at a quicker pace if allowed, putting the minorities in a better position to thrive in society while not keeping the wealth bottled up for the elites.